We have to reach a point in our life where we can't let the expectations of other people dictate what we do or don't do.
Hello and welcome to the Big 4-0 podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie McLaughlin. In our 20s and 30s, we spend so much time and energy striving for success and checking all the boxes, but it's usually according to some outside authorities' standards or approval. Then, in the years around age 40, many of us start to redefine who we are, what success means, and what we want out of life. We learn to have more confidence in our own authority and experience, and our life adjusts accordingly. Or we ignore it all and deal with the repercussions of not evolving. It's not always a smooth process. I fought against the transition, which made it a messier process than it had to be. On this podcast, I welcome you to tap into my stories and experience, as well as those of my guests, to help you make your way through your own transition, and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes we made along the way. Today, my guest is Francesca Montillo, who is doing exactly what most of us dream of doing. As she approached her 40th birthday, she left her corporate gig to take her side gig and dream job full-time. Now, she takes groups of people to tour Italy and teach them about its history, culture, food, and wine. Hi, Francesca. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Stephanie. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you for a couple of reasons. One, because we're going to talk about a dream life that most people would love to have. And two, because you're a fellow East Coaster. You and I are local. You're right in the Boston area.
Yes, we're practically neighbors.
Like I said, we're going to talk about a lifestyle that most of us dream of and you were able to make happen. But let's get to that in a couple of minutes and start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about your early life and about the forces that shaped you into the person you were when you opened the door to midlife.
Sounds good. So I'll just briefly go that far back. I was born in Calabria, Italy. And in 1988, when I was almost 11, my family and I moved to Boston. My mom had been raised in Boston. She had been here for many years before that. She, after around the age of 22, 23, went back to Italy, met my dad, moved back here, had my sister, but then they did a lot of back and forth. We finally came back in 88. I feel like my life has really been shaped by having had an Italian upbringing, by having been transported from a small town in Italy to Boston. I mean, can you imagine going from a town of 1,000 people to a city as big as Boston? It really, I feel like, shaped who I was and who I am now and what I do.
Because so many of those early years before we have speech, before we're in school, like are so formative for us.
Yeah.
And you spent them in Italy. That's amazing.
It's funny. I find that with expats, you have two. You have the ones that move from another part of the world to the US and pretty much forget where they come from. They just blend themselves into the US lifestyle, or the ones who have one foot here and one foot where they come from. And that's really more me. Even after we moved, we traveled every summer. We went back to Calabria. We still have a family property there. It was like we were living two different lives in a sense, because we always went back every summer. But after that, growing up here in Boston, I followed a pretty traditional path. I went to a college. I got my bachelor's and my master's degree. I had a very successful career in healthcare. I worked in the healthcare field for probably about 25 years before starting to transition into my life now. I had always had this idea for this business. I would say probably came to me when I was about 19 or 20. But it just seemed, like you said, like too impossible. It's like a permanent vacation. You can't make a living off of that. You can't do that. So I kind of brushed it off, and I just did the traditional route. And I kind of fell into healthcare. My bachelor's is actually in criminology. I wanted to work in law enforcement. So I had a very small, short-lived stint in law enforcement and working in the field before realizing that that wasn't for me. So I immediately transitioned to healthcare. And being in Boston, as you know, there's a hospital at every corner. It wasn't too difficult to transition to healthcare. And I eventually ended up getting a master's in healthcare administration. But it was never, my passion. It was never really what I wanted to do. It was a good field to be in.
Yeah.
No lack for work, no lack
Right.
for advancement. But my dad passed away when I was 30. He was 58, and just spending a lot of time in hospitals and doctors. And it's like, and then I had that as my career too. I knew I was like, this is not what I want to do. This is not my life's calling.
You told me when we first spoke that you had a yearning to be your own boss as long as you could remember. Were there entrepreneurs in your family?
From my dad's side, all of his brothers were entrepreneurs in Italy. They all owned restaurants, or my dad was a greengrocer in Italy. They all pretty much had their own, because in southern Italy, there isn't a lot of work, so you create your work. But I
Yeah.
knew from the get-go, from the beginning, that I was not going to be a good employee, in the sense that I like freedom. I don't like to have to ask permission. If I have a doctor's appointment one day, I don't want to have to be like, hey, can I take tomorrow off to go to the doctor? So I knew, it was like, this is not, and even growing up, my mother would tell me, she goes, oh, you're gonna have a hard time having a boss over you because you're too free spirited. You don't like getting up early in the morning. So I knew it just
But
took
that's
me longer to finally get the courage to do it and to jump in.
Well, I find you saying that so ironic because you said in your 30s you had this great job with this great boss and you kept getting promoted and more responsibility and more money. So tell me about that because it does not compute with what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's exactly like the part that was difficult about going to be an entrepreneur. Because sometimes I think it's easier if you hate your day job, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
you hate your day job, you're not making good money, you have a difficult boss, then you just want to jump into being your own boss because you have nothing to lose. But I was working for the Harvard Medical School Hospital. I had a great boss. We're still in contact years later. I had, great benefits, great salary, but all those things were great for somebody else.
Yeah.
That's what I always said. Somebody would have loved to have been in my position, but it wasn't me, especially towards the end. I was just like, I felt like a fraud. I was walking in every day, I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't want to be here. And I jumped into my business at 39, and I did it very carefully. I did it very quietly, and I didn't just walk into my boss and be like, hey, thanks. It's been real. I'm out of here. I transitioned very slowly. I did it very safely.
You said you had the kernel of the idea for your business when you were like 19 or 20, and then you didn't really act on it for almost, is that right? 20
Yeah,
years?
almost 20 years. Yeah.
So tell me how you went from the dutiful worker bee to finally trying something. Like, what did
Yeah.
you try? Where did you get the courage? Where did the gumption come from? What was the inspiration to say, now's the time? Tell me a
Now is the
little
time.
bit about those early days.
I think it was definitely the thought of turning 40. It was always in the back of my mind. And the issue too was that I've never felt my age. I'm 47 now and I still don't feel my age. I
Yeah.
look it, but I don't feel it, right? So I think I just woke up one day and be like, am I really turning 40 now? How did that happen? Like, I still feel 21.
Yeah.
There's no way I could be 40. So when it finally got real, I was like, okay, how can I do this without being too risky at it,
Yeah.
right? I was earning a fair amount of good vacation time by that point because I had been at the hospital for 10 years. So I was earning about 4 to 5 weeks of vacation time a year, which is a
Great.
lot, as you
Yeah.
know. The average is 2 weeks. So I said, okay, well, I could take some of that vacation time to run a few trips.
Now tell
That
me,
was
we haven't actually unveiled what it was that your business idea was. So explain what it was you thought you wanted to do.
I wanted to lead food and wine based trips to Italy. So I wanted to essentially go to Italy, bring people with me to eat and drink and learn about food. Yeah,
Francesca. Oh my
right.
God. That
And the
is
reason
like,
was because all this every summer growing up, we would go back to Italy and we would do just that. But how do you make a living off of that, right?
right.
It seems too good to be true. Of course, it was more than eating and drinking. It was learning about the Italian cuisine and vacationing, sightseeing. It was the whole package. So
Yeah.
I figured I would use some of my vacation time to run the trips. And I started in 2016, but I did it very cheaply. I built my own website, which was $300 investment. My friend Ryan built my first logo, and I paid him $100 because I wanted to feel like I was paying him rather than as a favor. I formed an LLC with the state of Massachusetts, which was $500. And I've never paid for marketing, never paid for advertisements. So for less than $1,000, I had started my business.
Yeah.
I didn't have much to lose. I didn't tell my boss anything because I figured even though we had a good rapport, this is my vacation time. This is, time for me to do what I want. So I didn't like promote it at my day job at all.
Mm-hmm.
Except that I was lucky enough that the Boston Globe did a nice marketing piece on me, and I didn't really account for the fact that my boss reads the Boston Globe. So he came in one day and basically was like, "What's this?" So that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
So that was in 2016, but I didn't have enough people to fill my trips until 2017. So the
Okay.
first year was just about the writing for the blog, for people to try and find me, to build a mailing list, because who was I going to sell these trips to when I started? Nobody knew about me. I didn't have a mailing list. I didn't have any social media presence. I needed to find a customer base. So the first year was really about just getting my name out there. So the
Yeah.
first trip that I actually ran was in 2017. And that only had 8 people. That was not profitable. It essentially was a paid vacation for me. But I needed to prove that this business had legs to stand on. I couldn't just quit a 20 plus year career on this idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll bet it was probably a benefit to go with a smaller group the first time and kind of prove out all of the things and work out all the kinks and figure out
Yeah.
all the things that went well and didn't go well before you had a full group with you.
Exactly. And also too, I needed to make sure that I actually liked doing it,
Ah,
because a lot of things, as you know, we like in theory, but in practice are a lot different. So I needed to make sure that I actually liked it. I liked traveling to Italy, but that had always been with friends or family. That had never
right.
been with paying clients. So the first trip, I think my legs didn't stop shaking for the whole week. And we had a great week. And then the Monday after, I went back to work. So I was kind of living the double lives. And after that first week's like, I got this. Yeah. I need to figure out now how to make this a full-time position.
So for the next 3 years, you ran them on your vacation time, right? So it's 2017, 18, and 19.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. By the end of 2019, I had really had a good business going that was almost replacing my salary at the hospital. So I actually gave my notice at the hospital at the end of 2019. I gave a 3 months notice, was planning on hiring my replacement and training them, and then COVID hit. And
Right.
then,
Well, I
yeah,
love the way you said to me at the beginning, or the first time we talked, you said, your boss he's in the medical field.
yeah,
And so in, December of 2019 and January of 2020, like
yeah.
he's got a bit of a better sense of what's coming at
What's
us than
going
anybody
on?
else did.
Yeah. So I gave my notice in December of 2019, and I was supposed to leave around February or March of 2020. And he came to me in my office and said, and again, he was very supportive of my business. He was, excited for me at
Yeah.
that point. And he said, "Are you still planning on traveling in May? This is May 2020 now." I said, "Of course I am. I have 3 sold out groups." And, he's like, "Well," he said, "I think you should reconsider because there's something coming down the pipeline that I don't think you're going to be traveling." And that, of course, was COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a shock,
But
definitely.
the wonderful part there was he allowed you to rescind your
Yeah,
resignation.
I pretty much did that. We started working from home. Everybody at the hospital started working from home. He knew I wouldn't be traveling, so I hadn't yet hired my replacement. So I ended up keeping my day job and not traveling in 2021. Yeah, it was quite brutal. It was quite painful because, having to issue all these refunds for people. Thankfully, a lot of people actually just selected to keep a credit with me and said, when
Yeah.
we're able to travel, we will travel. But it was painful. But I like to think that I made the best of that time anyway, as far as my business goes. I
Okay.
used the COVID time very wisely. I wrote my second and my third cookbook. One had already been published in 2019. I held hundreds of Zoom cooking classes because people couldn't get out of the house. So we were able to hold weekly, and I'm talking hundreds of Zoom classes. So a lot of those students ended up turning into travel clients.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely, by the middle of 21, I had sold out all of my 22 trips, even though we still weren't traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So it looked like things were picking up, and finally, at the end of 21, I gave my absolute notice. I said, "This is it. It's now or never. COVID be damned. We're gonna be traveling 22," and that's what we did.
And you did. Wow. And so how many tours do you do a year now?
So now between 7 and 8 group tours. So these are tours that anybody can sign up for from the website, and a couple of private tours. So these are families that want to travel on their own time frame with their own travel companions. So about
Yeah.
one or two, depending on the year. This year I had two private tours. So
You're
yeah.
only traveling like 10 weeks a year.
10 weeks. 10 about 10 weeks a year, and the rest of the year I spend on the planning. It takes hundreds of hours to plan the trips, make sure that things go as planned. I spend on blogging, which is non-paid. Nobody's paying me to blog, as you know, but I put out an article every week that goes out to my newsletter subscribers. I do occasional Zoom cooking classes. I do consulting for people who are traveling to Italy on their own, but need some help with where to go, where to stay, where to eat, what to do. So I
Yeah.
do some travel consulting as well. But the actual traveling right now is about 10 weeks out of the year, but I would love to do potentially more.
Wow. What was it like when you finally gave your final resignation in at the end of 2021? Was there any fear? Was there any concern? Because at this point you were, you had almost quit in
Yeah.
2019 and your boss and this job kind of saved you. And now
Yeah.
you are, you're like walking out of the nest, walking, no net, right?
No
No
nets
net below
falling.
you. Hi, we'll get back to the conversation in just a minute. We are about halfway through this examination of midlife transition. And this podcast is about your midlife journey as much as it is about mine or Francesca's. So let's make this conversation go both ways. I would love to hear your thoughts on your own transition. What have you run across? How are you managing the onset of what I call the ick? And what do you wish you knew about getting through it? Drop me a message on my website, thebig40.com, and spell out all those words. There's no numbers there. I'll also put those contacts in the show notes. All right, back to the show.
I mean, I have to admit, I like taking risks, and I always try to look at the best and worst case scenario, what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the best case scenario is that I would have a successful business that would support me, that would replace my salary from the hospital, that I would have fun doing, that I would enjoy traveling, meet new people. That's the absolute best case scenario. The worst case scenario is the opposite, that it's not going to work, that it's going to go belly up, that we're going to have another COVID, there's not going to be any traveling. Well, if
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, well, I still have my master's degree in healthcare. I
Right.
still have 25 years of experience in healthcare.
Yep.
I'll just go back to healthcare. I may not go back to where I left. I think that door was probably closed after having given my notice a few times.
Right.
But there's no lack of healthcare jobs in Boston. So the
Right.
best case scenario, this works. The worst, it doesn't. But even if it doesn't, no one's going to take away my background, and I'm highly
Yeah.
employable. So you don't know what you don't know
Yeah.
until you try.
Yeah, that's great. My dad always used to say, think of the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, and then throw both of those out because the reality is probably going to be somewhere in
Somewhere
between.
in the middle. Exactly.
Right. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden you become a gazillionaire and perfectly successful, or everything goes belly up and you're homeless. Neither of those things are going to happen.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, it helped that I didn't have kids. I don't have kids.
Right.
So I don't have to worry about saving for anybody's education or putting anybody through school. I mean, of course, I still have a mortgage on this property, but I had always been a good saver. So I
Yeah.
had years of savings to live off of if it came to.
Yep.
You don't know unless you try. And as you get older, you realize that you have less time to take those risks. So
Yeah. Let's go back a little bit. Tell me a little bit about, you said that one of the things that inspired you to make this leap was your impending 40th birthday. I know you said you didn't feel your age. Is there anything different culturally from your Italian culture versus your American/Boston culture, that 40 means something different in either one, or is it pretty consistent?
I think 40 in Italy is a lot older than 40 in the US.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. I know
It
when my
does.
mom turned 40, she felt old and like she was of no use anymore. And we moved from Italy when she was 38, and she already felt like it's too late for me to make a move like this. She's
Mm,
always felt a lot older than she actually is. I think
yeah.
just an Italian thing where like I said, I didn't feel my age. I still don't feel my age, but the reality is that we are what we are. So, when it finally like clicked to me that it was 2016, 2017 was gonna be a big year. I didn't have the kids that I thought I would have had by
Mhm.
that time frame. I felt like I needed to give birth to something, right? If that
Mm.
makes any sense. You know as well, like we had this conversation before,
Yeah.
I felt like I wanted to create something, and the business just made sense. And it's been the best decision I think I've made probably in my life to start my business and go on my own and to have the life that I'm able to have now.
Yeah, that does make complete sense to me because I also don't have any kids, and I refer to my business by the milestones it would have if it were a kid. So,
Right.
my marketing business will be 18 in February, which it blows my mind, right? Just like it blows any mom's mind that, their kid's going to be 18. My baby's going to be 18 soon. And then 2.5 years ago, I decided to start this podcast. And so I feel like I have an 18-year-old and a 2.5-year-old.
Quite an age in between the kids,
I
yeah.
do. I have
Yeah.
2 families.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I had told myself if I don't have kids by the time I'm 40, this was just a decision I had made years and years ago that if I didn't have any kids by the time I was 40, I didn't want any kids after that.
Right.
For a number of reasons, that's probably beyond the scope of the podcast, but it was a personal decision I had made that
Yeah.
it's 40 or bust. And if I
Yeah.
don't have them by then, I don't want them, quite honestly. And, I was 39. I was like, the kids aren't coming. The relationships aren't there to bring a kid now, you know, I
Yeah.
it's now or never, just go for it.
Yeah. And so is this business you've built, which is really as much a lifestyle as a business, is it as magical as you had hoped? Is it as magical as those of us listening sort of envision it to be?
It's pretty good, but it's also a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work. I was having dinner with somebody recently, and he said to me, he goes, "You have the best lifestyle because you work 10 weeks out of the year." And I was like,
Eh, That's
"Yeah,
not true.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's not true. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm on the road 10 weeks out of the year, but to get to that point, I work full time. I work every day in some capacity or another. It's just, that people will say when you do something you love, you never work. I'm calling BS on that because it's still work. It just happens to be work that you love doing and that you get to do perhaps from the comfort of your own home rather than having to drive into an office.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, I love what I do. There isn't a day that goes by, there isn't somebody who signs up for my trip that I don't get excited about, but it still is work to get to those. It's work finding the clients, it's work promoting it, the planning. Italians, I think I can say, being an Italian myself, they kind of work on their own time frame. You schedule a bus to come and pick up your group at 9 and they'll show up at 9:20 and think nothing of it. So it's a lot of planning work that goes into it.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me as somebody who's planned events and even my own vacations before. I mean, if I were to think about it, I'd say for every 1 week in Italy, it could be 3 to 4 weeks of planning time. So now you're at 40
Right.
weeks plus your 10 weeks training. There's a year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Was
Plus,
your
there's a
10
lot.
week?
I have my clients, there's a lot of experienced travelers, but there's a lot of first time travelers too. So they kind of need a little bit more hand holding of what it means to even travel, how to get their connections, how to secure their private transfers to the hotel. It depends on who your travelers are. Some of them who have never traveled outside of the US need, you kind of have to work with them as well to reassure them. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of back and forth.
One of the things that is so common about this transition period for most of us in our mid 30s to mid 40s is we stop putting so much weight in other people's opinions. There's this transition from doing all the things that we should be doing
Yeah.
to doing the things that we feel are best for us and relying on our own expertise and knowledge of what we think we want for ourselves versus what everybody else tells us we should have.
Right.
I'm very curious, coming from such a traditional cultural background, was there a lot of pushback to you for leaving this steady, solid, stable job and going off on
Yeah.
your own? Did people try to talk you out of it?
I think what happened was I had a successful career. I had a master's degree that I was still paying for. My family moved from a small town in Italy to come to Boston, right? Where they felt like my sister and I could have become literally anything in the world. We could have been the next US president if we set our mind to it. There's nothing you can't do.
Mhm.
I was set to go into law. I was set to have a successful career that was not about Italian food or wine or anything but, because you could
Yeah,
do anything else. So even for me, it was a little bit like I could do and be anything. Am I betraying the sacrifice that my parents made to bring my sister and I to the US to be successful, whatever you might want to call it, and
right.
now to only quote unquote do food travel. I felt
Right.
guilty. I felt like my education was going in vain. The sacrifice they made I wasn't respecting that for them. But I think, again, my father died long before my business started. My
Mhm.
mother was just happy to see me happy.
Good.
So, and that's where she is today. If this is what makes you happy, then, by all means, you're successful at it and take me with you if you
Yeah,
can. But I think that's if you love somebody, once you see them successful and happy, that's all that should matter and nothing else.
right. But it sounds like you did go through that process of really having to detach from those external expectations,
Right,
even if they were in your own head of the
right.
things that you quote unquote should
Should,
be
right.
doing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And you
definitely. Even my family in Italy, like, they didn't get the concept, like, "You want to bring people here to do what? Don't you work for Harvard? Like, why why would you wanna do this?" But now that they see that I'm successful and that I can make quite a good business at it, then like, "Okay, well, that's what makes you happy, so be it." And we also too, like, we have to reach a point in our life where we can't let the expectations of other people dictate what we do or don't do. And that was hard for me too because I'm a reasonably private person. I don't like to expose myself a lot. But when you have a business, you kind of have to.
yeah.
So, like, be on social media, you have to go to networking events, you have to write these newsletters to people. And I'm one that likes to be in the background, but my business certainly has taken me out of my shell a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, all your new skills as a mom.
Yeah, exactly. Right. As a business mom. Yeah.
Right, as a
It's like you do
business
what you have to
mom.
for your baby, right? And this is the
That's
same thing. Like, I
that's
wouldn't do it
exact
for myself, but you
uh,
do it for your baby, and, it's the same way for the business.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. I just love the way that you started this. You just tried it. Just went ahead and tried it. You didn't put a ton of pressure on yourself to say this has got to be a fully baked experience, not experience, that's not
Yeah,
the right word. This doesn't have to be a fully baked idea for me to at least try it.
try it. Yeah. Yeah, that's because I started small. I
Yeah.
started, small and on the side. I think that if I had quit my job from the very beginning, from concept to actually, like I said, I started in 2016, but it was a year and a half later that I had my first tour. I
Right.
think had I quit my job in 2016, it would have been a lot more pressure and a lot more stress on I got to get those clients. I got to get those clients. If I didn't get those clients, well, I still had an income coming in from the day job. So I highly advise anybody thinking about starting a business, unless you're starting a brick and mortar storefront, to try it on the side first to make sure that your business has legs to stand on before you make any financial disastrous decisions.
Yeah, before you make big decisions,
Yes,
right? You
exactly.
can yeah, yeah, doing it on the side is I like to think of it as sort of training wheels.
When I started, my investment was very small. Now, of course, I paid for somebody to do my website. I have a mailing list that's very expensive every month. There's a lot more expenses, but
Yeah.
until I knew that that I even liked running these tours. And until I knew that I could make a business at it, my investment was very, very small.
Yeah. Wow. Francesca, this is just such a wonderful story. I hear so often people starting their own businesses around this midlife period because when we get to this point, we realize that the thing that we've worked so hard for, the position on the corporate ladder that we've fought so hard for, it turns out it's not as fulfilling or
Yeah.
satisfying as we had hoped it would be, or it doesn't allow us the flexibility to do the things that are fulfilling or satisfying. For you, you knew for a long time that that wasn't the end game.
Yeah.
Um, but I love to hear these stories of how people started their businesses in midlife, because I think so many people are sitting in jobs they don't want to be in thinking if only I could, and I
Right.
think you're saying you can.
You can, right. And that's exactly it. I had worked at the hospital for 10 years really hard to advance myself and had devoted myself every week. And I felt like, and again, I loved my bosses. Actually, one of my bosses' mom came on one of my tours, but I felt like I was working really, really hard to make somebody else's dream come true, right?
Yeah.
I felt like I was devoting my time, my energy, my mental health to make their dreams become a reality. And I like to think that I really helped them. And I worked in a research group. So I like to think that I really did help them in making their dreams come true. But when we get to that age, it's like, okay, well, now is the time to make my own dreams come true. That's what it
Yes.
comes to.
So well said. So well said. What a wonderful way, I think, to end this conversation and just remind everybody that it's time to make your own dreams come true.
Yeah. And
So,
start where you are. That's what I always tell people, start where you are. And then there's no limit where you can go, but start with what feels comfortable and where you are and go from there.
oh, Francesca, I love that. Before I let you go, though, I have to have you share the name of your company, because I'm guessing that you don't need to be in or around Boston to travel with you. So tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So I named my business Lazy Italian Culinary Adventures. Then it was just a little tongue-in-cheek name. It means really doesn't mean much, but people always ask me where did that come from. So I think people remember it. My website is thelazyitalian.com. So easy to remember. I am on social media. I've always leaned more towards Facebook. I'm trying to make more of a push for Instagram, but they can find me there and they can find my cookbooks on Amazon. So I have 3 cookbooks out, and they can always, reach out if they have any questions or they want to travel to Italy.
That's great. Well, I don't know. Patrick and I have been talking about going to Italy. It's on our list. So you may have just greased the wheels for that
Yeah.
destination. So
Well, I hope so. I'm obviously biased, but I think Italy is probably something everybody should experience at least once in their life. I really do. I
I
believe that
agree.
wholeheartedly.
I agree. Oh, Francesca, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you again for having me, Stephanie. Take care.
You too. Thanks so much for listening today. Haven't we all dreamed of chucking our day job for a life in Italy or some other glamorous locale? Especially in this age of digital nomadic life, you can nearly taste it. But there are a couple of things about what Francesca did that I want to point out today, because they align so nicely with this midlife transition we face sometime around our 40th birthday. First, and this one is fundamental to this midlife transition, Francesca put down the shoulds that she internalized from her upbringing. She put down the guilt. She chose her own way. And now, having said that, I've got You Can Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac ringing in my head right now, but let's keep going. You heard how she wrestled with the feeling that she was betraying her parents' sacrifice or abandoning her education by choosing an unconventional path. But I am here to tell you that living authentically isn't selfish. It's what you're meant to do. And getting to that is part of what this transitionary period is all about. One of the most fundamental parts of the transition is around this time, we start to believe more in ourselves, in our own authority and expertise, than we do those external authorities that we've listened to or turned to for advice for decades. It's that moment, usually in our late 30s or our early 40s, when the volume of those external voices starts to fade and the voice within us begins to speak louder and clearer. We let go of that guilt that's tied to our family's expectations, to cultural or societal norms, or even what we might think of as the sunk costs of our identity. For decades, Francesca really did honor that path that she was supposed to take. She earned her degrees, she built a successful career, she stayed in a stable job. In many ways, she was living out the dreams her parents had sacrificed for. But even with all those gold stars, even with all her achievements, something inside her was restless. And it went way back, all the way back to childhood. She always knew she wanted to be her own boss. So when she began to listen to her own dreams, she had to confront her guilt about stepping off that traditional pathway, about quote unquote wasting her education, and about turning away from, or so she thought, those opportunities her family worked so hard to give her. But that's the hallmark of stepping into second adulthood. It's not a rebellion. It's a realignment. It's the moment we stop deferring to those outside authorities and begin trusting ourselves. Francesca didn't throw away her past. She built on it. But she stopped living someone else's vision of her life and started living her own. So if you're in that same place and feeling the tug of something new, but also maybe feeling guilty for wanting more than you have, I'm going to invite you to listen a little more closely to your inner voice. And I'm also going to remind you that you are allowed to change. You are allowed to want something different. It's okay. All right, here's another important point about today's story. Francesca didn't throw everything away to chase her dream. She tested the waters, she built slowly, and she kept her day job until she had proven that her side hustle was viable. And I think this is a reassuring and a practical lesson that we can learn from her. You don't need to make a big leap without a net to change your life. You can take calculated, courageous steps while honoring your existing responsibilities. You can start small. You can start even if you don't know exactly where you're going, even if your ultimate destination, as far as you can tell, is just not here. Because making a change doesn't require a dramatic exit. You could begin with a $300 website, with a weekend experiment, or simply asking yourself what you want for once. So practical bite-sized steps might scratch that itch for change if you're still too scared or maybe not even ready to take a big leap. And I want to dig into that a little bit. I'm going to walk through 3 different transitions that commonly come up in these conversations. And I am going to provide you with a couple of examples of small exploratory steps that you might consider that could provide information and feedback on this path that you're contemplating. So, if you're feeling the ick in your career, here are 4 small steps and what they might look like. Number 1, use paid time off or weekends to explore an idea. So like Francesca did, your vacation time, your weekends, that's all opportunity to try out a side gig, a creative pursuit, or a new skill without quitting your day job. Number 2, freelancing or maybe even consulting on the side. What if you could start picking up some small projects in the evenings or on the weekends to test the waters of a new field or a new skill or a new way of operating before you went all in? Number 3, taking a class or maybe getting certified in some sort of skill. Because enrolling in a class or an online program will help you build new skills and credentials, and that could move you towards a new path without disrupting your life too much. And fourth, volunteering. If you can find something that looks like what you're yearning for out in the world, offer to help someone doing what you think it is you want to do, because that'll help you learn pretty quickly whether you love the reality or if it just sounds like a good idea. If you're feeling the ick emotionally or internally or trying to make changes in your identity, here are 3 small steps you can think about. Number 1, practice saying no to just one small thing each week. Make it a game. Begin by gently drawing boundaries where you've overcommitted or where you've been people-pleasing out of habit. Number 2, journal privately about what you want and what that might look like. What if you carved out space, even 15 minutes, to start being honest with yourself about what you want without any pressure to act on it? Just write it down and see what it looks like and feels like. And number 3, talk to a therapist or even a coach to start unpacking the identity that you've outgrown so that you're not the only one carrying it while you still have to show up for all your responsibilities as you make a shift. And then finally, if you're feeling the ick in your lifestyle or in your relationships, here are 3 small changes that you might just try. Like having one brave conversation. And it could be with anyone. It could be a partner, a friend, a boss, a relative. What if you shared what's going on inside you and see what they had to say or what support might come out of it? Number 2, you could try changing your environment in small ways. I mean, that could be as easy as rearranging a room in the house or a cabinet if that's too big to even consider. Maybe start walking daily or change who you spend your time with, because these small shifts can help create space for bigger ones later, and they can also show you the way. And third, try a whole weekend of living a different life. Call it like a life prototype weekend. What if you spent 48 hours as if you're already living your dream? Whatever it is that's a part of the dream that's not a part of your life today, try it. Writing, hiking, resting, cooking, dancing, singing, crafting, exercising, swimming, whatever it is. Try it. Try it on like you try on a new outfit for 48 hours. And then figure out, how does it feel? So each of these examples really honors the reality that midlife is a time when we are full of obligations, but it doesn't have to mean that you're stuck, because change can be incremental and transformative. So often we think about transition or transformation and we get overwhelmed because we imagine it has to be a dramatic leap, a total reinvention, or it's a failure. But Francesca's story is that reminder that transformation doesn't always have to be loud or reckless. Sometimes it looks like building your own website for $300 while keeping your day job. Sometimes it looks like using your vacation time not just to rest, but to test drive a dream. Francesca didn't make the leap before she had built the road that she was leaping onto. She honored the career that she'd built, the family who raised her, and the education that she worked so hard for. But she did not ignore that persistent whisper that she was meant to do something else. She didn't let go of that yearning to be her own boss. She got curious. She started small, and she gave herself permission to try. And maybe that's something that you could do too. You don't have to blow up your life to change it. Maybe for you, the first step looks like signing up for a class or having one honest conversation or blocking off a weekend to live like the person you think you want to become. Whatever your version of Italy is, my question for you today is, what's one small step you could take this week to get a little closer to it? Because the truth is, the most meaningful change starts not with a big leap, but with a soft nudge, a whisper from inside, and a single, quiet yes. All right. Next time, you are going to meet Elizabeth Makepeace, who left a marriage that wasn't working at age 40. Her husband was much younger than her, and after pursuing her and wooing her, he changed completely when they got married. And she realized that as a healer, she was trying to heal him. But she did finally come to the understanding that it wasn't her job to do that, and that he had a choice whether he wanted to heal or not, and he had made it. So this is the story of putting her life back together, taking her power back, and connecting with her heart and her identity. Can't wait to share that one with you next time. The Big 4-0 podcast is produced and presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications.